I'm just going to lay down some ground rules perhaps. We're going to try to keep our answers clear, concise, and short. If I have to, impose timer, I will. Might take me a little while to get it situated. 2 minutes maybe, 3 minutes, depends. Okay, but if we can stick to being reasonable from the get-go, we should be okay. Do we have any questions yet from anybody?
First, can we get introductions? I don't know.
Yes, we'll get to that too.
Okay.
Has everybody written down questions, thought of things they want to ask different candidates? Write those down. This is a good time for that. And then I will take those questions and I will ask them either to everybody or a specific candidate. We'll just kind of take it one thing at a time. Also, please, we're not here to fight. We're not here to one-up anybody. This is kind of like an informal job interview. So all of us are in the seat of hiring, so we're going to keep it civil. I probably don't need to say it, but I'm doing it. Okay, so yes, now a good thing to start with would be introductions. You want to start with?
Are we just going to do our name or
Your
just
name,
clear right away?
what you're running for.
Okay.
That's probably good to start with.
My name is Patrick Bacher, and I'm running for District 11 City Council to be an alder. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debra Ryan. I'm running for District 11 as well for the City Council.
My name is Tom Killian. I'm running for District 3 Alderperson.
My name is William Harris, and I'm running for District 3 County Board.
Hi, I'm Sarah Watson. I'm running for District 8 City Council.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Are we ready to? I can go around and see if we're ready for questions yet. Not yet? Any questions in on the card? No? No? Oh, we're all thinking? Oh, so I gotta go by the seat of my pants here. Anybody else? Oh, all right. Okay, this is our first question. So, we can start with Sarah this time. We'll go that way. What is the city plan, and you might not know it completely right now, for Thomas Street vacant lands, if they are going to be developed? Do you think that the city of Wausau should disclose the presence of underground pollution? And is the area going to be tested to protect new construction areas? That's the question, if you want to add anything to it, but we're going to try to keep it concise. So go ahead.
So honestly, I don't know anything about the plan for that property, but of course I think it's important to do the testing, and I think Tom has done a lot of advocacy for that, but it's really important for, I guess, transparency. I think transparency is important, so testing, printing that document, having it be open, I think would be ideal.
Cool. William?
Same thing. I think in terms of Thomas Street, I think there's going to have to be coordination between both county board and city on that level. I think definitely we have to look at any sort of environmental impact in terms of the area. Look at have testing. I think it's very important to make sure that we're building somewhere that's safe, so that we don't put people at risk, and also to make sure that we have a solid foundation in terms of infrastructure. I think we have to come up with a strategic plan and look at all aspects and make sure that we do it right and get a lot of input in terms of all the professionals involved.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, and this one's close to my heart and my home, since I'm right near that area. It would be occurring right across the street from where I live on the north side of Thomas Street. And currently, there was an RFP for the development of these remnant parcels, and one company submitted a proposal. It is affiliated with Blinker, who did the townhome developments on the west side of the street. Now, apparently they're asking right now, they would like the neighborhood land for $1. That's what they're asking the city, and they're asking for 20% TIF participation. And there was an issue with this at the last economic development meeting, because I had heard about this about a half an hour before they discussed that proposal, and I think a lot of people in the neighborhood had not known about that yet, so we're asking for a listening session on this. The city has tentatively said perhaps March 31st. And to the issue of contamination, yes, I do think the city should disclose to any potential developers contamination, including groundwater contamination, if there's a plume under those properties. And lastly, I think it's important for the public to know that this is a TIF potential development, and that TIF district was started on March 10th of 2005. So legally, they have to push these projects through by March 10th of May 10th of 2020. So it was started in May of 2005 and will end in May of this year. So we just have to be vigilant as a community that we get our input in before that date in terms of TIF.
Thank you, John. Deb?
From part of what I've learned about the Thomas Street and the reconstruction, a lot of the issues that were brought up were about the contamination that may be down like 12 to 14 feet. So I'm not familiar with the actual specs of the properties that have been built, and primarily with the duplexes side by side, townhomes with solar panels, where an investor has bought, I thought 7 or 8, and has a deal to buy 10 of them for the tax credits. But part of the issue, and may be helpful, is to be looking at, are some of these properties should just be built on a slab so that you're not dealing with digging up a full basement and potential contamination. I do think the testing should be involved because the city is very aware of concerns in that area. And as the city owning the property, they should be doing further testing, and also it should be included as part of that information about the land. I'm concerned as well about the townhouses. They just seem to have been overbuilt on the west side with a postage stamp backyard. And it just seems like some of these lots should have been small homes or tiny houses or container homes or maybe a garage style as a limit size, so that you do have some land and some property. I have seen a number of birch clumps that have been recently planted above ground on the east side near Tom's house and that, but I'm not sure what the plans are, and we need to get the city to answer these questions for all of us and the neighborhood.
Thank you, Deb. Patrick?
I also believe the city should be able to answer everyone's questions, and everyone's drinking water should be safe. It's not in my district, however, I travel through often. It's my understanding from what I read this week that Blinker is on hold for future townhomes until a neighborhood listening session happens, and I believe a neighborhood listening session should have happened a long time ago. I think, though, that it is important that something happens, so it's also my understanding that all the townhomes are built on a slab. None of them have an actual basement. They go up in like 3 days. I will drive through one day and notice some pipes sticking out of the ground, and then the next day concrete is poured and walls are up.
Okay.
I certainly, if I lived there, I would certainly be very passionate about what was happening in my neighborhood. So having everybody at the table is important. And it is my understanding that Blinker is willing to do that and wants all that input before they further develop with more townhomes. Thank you.
Okay, so now this was kind of maybe a summary question. And it might seem like a gotcha question, but in terms of environmental issues in the city of Wausau or the county, and it can be anything from groundwater, cleanliness to farm runoff, all these very important issues that we have. If you could pick a stance, aggressive or wait and see, which direction would you go? You don't need to go into depth at all, but just off the cuff to give everybody an idea of how important it is to you as a candidate.
So like environmental concerns and
Yep, and a lot of those could fit underneath that, but just aggressive or wait and see?
I think aggressive. I mean, we can't wait anymore. You know, we want our planet to be around and our standards look high, so
Okay.
aggressive.
Thank you.
Aggressive. I mean, drinking water, having clean drinking water, I think is a no-brainer. You don't want what happened like in the areas like Flint and other stuff to be here. I think those are just basics, and we want to make sure that everyone is healthy, and there's something environmental that's going on. We should be doing something about it.
Thank you.
Yes, aggressive as well, and I think if the city signals its interest to do this aggressively, then perhaps state regulators will follow suit.
I'm for being aggressive in regarding to the safety and environment and slow in making the decisions to make sure that things are being done properly. It happens, one of my neighbors has built a house that has a lot of natural springs. And he didn't realize it until after buying it, but he was told you could kayak in your basement. And if I had known he was thinking of it, I would have suggested do not buy this house. So there's natural springs that are becoming issues all around town. And if you're in an area that it is a large spring, should that lot have not been built on? And so it's more important to go ahead and really look at the issues and be cautious before building or making a project because of the safety issues. And especially in the Thomas Street area, just south of Thomas Street, there has been a number of people that have died from cancer in that area. And so that is a hot spot, and there may be other homes eventually in the future that may be as well if redeveloped there.
I am aggressive about the quality of our water and our air. I moved here because it's a beautiful area. I'm also a well owner. I have a non-potable well in my yard that the gentleman who built our home wanted to keep after their wells were all fouled by a research station many years ago in like 1972. But that well is tested even to be proven safe as non-potable. I like the ability to water my lawn and my garden with it, knowing that it's safe.
Okay, thank you. Anybody ready to answer the question? All right.
There's cards around the table so that if you have questions, you're welcome to write your questions down.
All right. I'm just going to read it out loud instead of trying to think through it. Given the city's dismal track record on land transactions, are you in favor of the city getting out of the land business, putting city-owned property up for sale? I wonder if I can keep going. No, I'll stop at that one. You want to take that?
Sure, I'm not. So I don't think the city should be in the building business. I feel the city should make land available to people who would invest not city dollars in developing it. However, if the city does own the land, there should be some assurance that what happens fits into the bigger scheme of the city. Haphazard of selling off parcels and this goes here and that goes there, that doesn't work for our city's future.
I'd like to mention about, for the west side property and the printing property over at First and Stewart Avenue. It happens that the Alexander Foundation came up with money to loan in order to purchase those properties. And the printers was torn down, and I think there was some contamination issues that had to be addressed. And then the west side battery was left out. And Urban Bistro had been looking at that property and wanting to close on it for over 2 years, but it just seemed to keep on getting delayed and delayed and delayed. And I attended one of the economic development meetings a few months ago where they were still talking about it, and I had said that, you know, occasionally a little food truck could go from that kind of business and grow maybe 400% to have a sit-down restaurant, but the odds are kind of not realistic and not very hopeful. And so I had suggested as part of the economic development looking at that proposal to go ahead and get tax returns and other financial information. And Mr. Neal and the Economic Development Committee decided not to ask. Judith Miller, another candidate, asked who was his bank, and he indicated People's State Bank, but People's was never contacted, so he lied in front of the committee, and then ended up with theft at the local Sam's Club, and then took away his proposal a few months later. So it seems that the economic development in the city with Mr. Schock seems to be giving away property for $1 or for free. And even for the West Side Battery, they gave it for $1, but there still is $250,000 loan on the property. So it just doesn't seem like they really understand you're giving it away for free, but you're still owe the Alexander Foundation $250,000.
So Deb, what you're saying is absolutely not, the city should not be in that business.
We're losing money left and right.
Okay.
Playing monopoly with real estate.
Thank you.
I think occasionally the city may find itself holding land and property incidentally, but as an active pursuit, I think I can say that my opinion on it moving forward is that it's risky from a financial standpoint, and I can say as a fact that it's often worked out poorly for the community in the past. Now, one thing I would encourage the audience or community members to do is go to the city website, and there are some master plans on their website. So you've got the West Side Master Plan, near West Side, and so forth. Now what you'll find, and the first time I encountered this I was pretty surprised and disappointed, is that you know, within the last 20 years, our community, large parts of it have been planned out as a monopoly board. Okay, so that West Side Battery property, that wasn't happenstance. It's in the master plan. That property was to be purchased and sat on so that the city and a select few, you know, the same select few as we often see, could plan out what happens with it. So not only do we run into these financial liabilities, but it takes the participation of the community at large outside of the process. So you've got 10, 20, 30 people in town deciding how our city's planned as a monopoly board. And I think that that's not positive for the community, and it shows that the local economy is not healthy, because people would be developing and pursuing this property if there was an opportunity. The government shouldn't have to juice and choreograph every business deal in town.
I know you're running for county,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if you can get a spin on that.
But, I mean, I guess, just generally in my thoughts, in agreement with most of, no, I don't think the city should be in the business of doing that. And if they are, there needs to be a lot of accountability and a lot of input from the people that it's going to impact.
Thank you.
I guess sort of tapping into some of the economic background, I think the government should be sort of involved in like dangling carrots, but I think it should be more transparent, more open, and more collaborative. So I think selling a property for $1 for free probably not the best idea. But, you know, I think there needs to be a strategy, a plan, but it's something that everybody should collaborate on.
Okay, thank you. The second part of this, I'm just gonna ask that you say yes or no. Are you in favor of supporting SB 560 on a moratorium of TIF spending until our financial house is in order?
I've been reading a lot about TIF spending lately.
Patrick? Let's go with the yes or no.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I know we have a lot of questions to get through, and I know we have a lot of passion, but we'll just keep that one on.
Can you repeat the question?
I can. Are you in favor of supporting SB 560, is it question mark? On a moratorium on TIF spending until our financial house is in order? Now, personally, I don't know the background of that, so I can't give you.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
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 Yes, it's not a moratorium, but I do support the bill, yes.
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 Okay. Let's see. All right. It is my understanding that as an older person, you are to represent the needs and concerns of our constituents and not what you personally feel. Is that your understanding? We'll start with you, Sarah.
Can it be more than a word?
This one can be a couple sentences here.
So, yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a nonpartisan position, so it's all about representing the community, right? Representing the people in our district. So everybody has a multitude of viewpoints, and it's all about listening. So.
Well, in my everyday, I'm an attorney, so I represent people all the time. I think it's important to represent the constituents, but I also think it's important to show leadership too when it calls for it. But if you have to make some tough decision, it's important to have a lot of feedback and talk to your constituents about why, if you have to make some hard decision, why you're making it, and make sure that everyone at least understands you. Because sometimes, if you have to make a tough decision, maybe some people might disagree, but at least they can respect it if they know that you involved them in the process and input, and you tried to represent their best interests, and that's what I would do.
Thank you.
I think William made some good points, and at the core, I believe that I want my priorities as a city council person to be the priorities of my constituents. And yes, I think there's interplay and discussion and debate, but at the end of the day, I want to represent their interests and concerns at City Hall.
Thank you.
My purpose is to reinforce and support the taxpayers. I do feel, though, Dennis Smith did not support the mall. And the mall decision was rushed through. And there was no corporation set up for months after the decision was made. And that it ended up that the other parties that were interested feared contamination, so everybody else dropped out. And I don't think the residents were informed of that. And that now the other developers want the city to kick in another $2 to $3 million. So it came across as a crisis, questioning whether they were even set up as a not-for-profit or should be a for-profit, and making a decision. So a number of alderpersons did have calls from their residents and were concerned about the mall and voted that way.
So what you're saying is perhaps there are a lot of representatives who may not be listening to their constituency?
That for Dennis, he voted no, even if residents were concerned, because it was so vague. They weren't even set up as a corporation yet.
So if elected, what would you do?
Because of my background in finance and accounting, and not having it set up as a corporation, to me, it just seems that there was too much rush, and that it should have been delayed, and I agreed with Dennis's vote.
Okay.
My background is in adult mental health, and I'm an advocate for all of the clients that we work with. my strongest skill, the skill that I need to do my job well, is listening. And as Tom kind of hinted, I wouldn't feel comfortable representing the district without hearing as many opinions and really getting to know what people were looking for. I think in meeting with a lot of city officials, they don't hear a lot from their constituents. They often only hear some negative pushback things after there was some time to make some decisions. I've been attending a lot of council meetings and kind of trying to get their flow or how they make the decisions, but I know that I'm a listener and I would want to honestly represent everyone in the district.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move to another one here, and I'll probably come back to that. This is another question about TIF districts. We touched on that. And we touched on West Side Battery. I don't think we went into detail about taxpayer dollars. But if we have time, we will circle back to that one. This is involving media interactions. I know each of you talked about how you would come across or how you would involve voters in your job if elected. So this, I would like to bring to your attention here the question about media interactions, specifically with media, print or otherwise. If you have any very specific thoughts regarding that. Patrick, you want to start?
So how do you mean, my thoughts on media?
Well, I'll read you the question here.
Okay, that might be.
How do you plan on interacting with the public and the media? How will you keep the residents informed in terms of information, not just your style? Like we talked about our communication style a little bit already, so if you want to be specific with media.
Well, I think being honest, open, transparent about decisions that are being made, being polite and cordial. I think from our city officials, we want a message that people are working together and that there is cooperation.
And how about frequency in communication? How often? I mean, should it happen a lot? Should some things?
I guess it would depend on the style of communication. I know that if I ever had a question for Dennis, I would email him and he would answer me right away. We may have had some disagreements on other things, but he was always reachable. I think you should answer your phone, you should check your email, you should attend a meeting if there's something important happening that you have an opinion on, you should be there.
Okay.
For media, I guess in the past, I've gone over the last 8 years to over 200 city council and committee meetings. So to get a feel of how things are running and information. And quite often in the written city minutes, the residents that are coming for public comments are very diminished, to the point Debra Ryan talked about West Side Battery. Well, I said more than that. Information, asked about why aren't you looking for financial statements and such. So it seems that for a number of residents, you have the opportunity now to be looking online at videos. But I do think for a number of committees, say if I was not on economic development or finance, I would want to be attending those meetings because they are so important to what the city council will eventually be talking about. I have been leading the Westies Neighborhood group here for 6 years and have been involved in it for over 10 years. And we're fortunate that we do have an active group here as well as Worley Park does, and which is also in my district and Patrick's district. So I would plan on being involved in that as well. At times I've had some comments put in the city pages or other ways where I'm talking and my picture is taken. I'm not talking directly to a reporter, but some of my comments have been given. Now, some of the other council people have been talking on the radio or giving other kind of information. Other older persons have their own kind of website, and I guess I would encourage more use of that so that residents see that there's the first part, but then the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, that may not be discussed. The good, the bad, and the ugly is the points that I've been trying to make with the city, where quite often the department heads and the mayor are only focusing on the 20% that they want the alderpersons to do. So to keep neighbors informed and via email, contacting, as well as a website, I think is very important.
Well, in terms of media and reporter relations, I'd kind of like to hit it on two fronts. One would be just interpersonal relations and how city and our government interacts with reporters. And then secondly, I'd like to talk about records, public records, and open records. And I think first and foremost, I think we should be appreciative of our local media and realize they're on the front lines, okay? So hopefully things in our local government, hopefully facets of them aren't rotten or hidden from us or handled poorly or illegally, but unfortunately we know sometimes that occurs. And so it is the media, we need to appreciate that they're on the front line of identifying these issues often, and that is for our protection as citizens. So I think the city needs to treat them with the respect they deserve professionally, and we may even need to strengthen some protocols on how the media, not just the media, but the media is treated and citizens. Okay, it's the same thing. If we're so fortunate, any of us, to be victorious and be in government, we have to realize we're servants. Okay, that comes with humility. It's courtesy, it's politeness. It is not our role to be discourteous to the media or to citizens. Those rules need to be strengthened. Secondly, I would say that open records and public records, that will be a central focus of mine, something I will champion. And we don't need to just catch up, we need to lead as a city. We need to strip the barriers. Those aren't the government's records, those are our records, okay? And we shouldn't have to do some laborious process to get what belongs to us in the first place. So what I will try to do, if elected, is to strip those barriers, make city emails searchable online. All the representatives, employees, department heads, make every record possible scanned and entered into a database. Now, that may seem expensive. On the front end, there's a cost, but we can reduce labor and time of those open records processes and actually reduce cost or at least level it out. So that would be my plan with the media and open records.
Thank you.
I think if you're going to be a representative, you need to be accountable and accessible to the people that you represent. That means media, certainly. If I'm so fortunate to be elected, I'll be available for media interviews. I'll be available for meetings like this. I want to be a person where you go out through the community, you just say, who's your representative? A lot of people say, I don't know. I want to be a representative that you know, and that you know if you have an issue, that you have a problem, that you can call, that you can email. If there's something going on major within the district, you should know about it. You should be informed about it. And if you have questions, you should feel comfortable enough to come to a meeting and be aware when the meetings actually occur. So I want to be as accessible as I can, because how else can you represent someone? In my everyday practice, it's about building relationships. And I want to build a relationship with my community, and so that they feel comfortable enough that they can come to me with any problem, and maybe I can't solve them all, but I can at least get an answer. One of the things I do is problem solving, and that's what I want to do for my community, and be available and accessible.
Thank you. I think, as everybody stated, accessibility is important. I actually, after, hopefully if I get elected, right, I can do some office hours where I know it's sort of the teacher in me, but I'll sit at like a coffee shop and just let my constituents know that I'm there so they can come down and have a cup of coffee. I really love technology, so I'm gonna blog, I'm gonna email, I'm gonna have a website, so that's all fun stuff to do too, but yeah, just keep getting the information out.
Okay, thank you. Before I collect more questions, I don't know if anybody's got a couple. Oh, we have a couple over here. Kind of like what we were just talking about in communicating. We've got a couple different demographics. Every community does. How would you unify the sense of our community of Wausau or the county into like one picture or one idea or one thing that we could all focus on, or we could come together? Sometimes it's a symbol, sometimes it's an idea of a place. If you could pick that one idea or image or symbol, feeling, I'm just making this up as I go along, to unify different groups of people in our community, what would you pick? Would you pick a symbol like the Dudley Tower, for example? Would you pick our natural resources? How would you unify the things that you talked about right now and the different demographics that we have? How would you unify that with one focus, one way of communicating? I'm probably going too far here, but.
If I'm understanding you correctly, I don't know if you want an image or an event that happens in the city.
Whatever
I think the city
strikes
needs to
you
work.
as
I think the city needs to work on inclusion with everyone in the community.
and how do you think, how would you push for that?
Advocating for people, being a good neighbor, participating in events that are open and welcome to everyone in the community, promoting fair treatment for everyone. As an event, there's several things about Wausau that I like. So you touch on the natural resources. That's one of the reasons that I moved here. I moved here for my relationship, but I also love being outside. I like hiking, I like gardening, I like biking. I think if the city worked on some inclusion issues and making everyone feel welcome and promoting being a good neighbor and a good support system, then I think that it would be more of a vibe than the Dudley Tower.
More of a vibe.
People
I like
would
that. More of a
people
vibe
would
than the
feel
Dudley
it
Tower.
more.
Yeah,
It's
I like that.
not something that you're gonna look at and say the balloon glow is Wausau or the Dudley Tower is Wausau.
I think that same vibe, that does it right there. Yeah.
For me, I have seen some clip art of different hands of different colors coming together. And to me, that kind of envisions a way of looking at how the community is, as well as going beyond just the hands. It happens this past winter when we had one of our bad storms. One young lady ended up getting stuck in a snowbank on Elm Street near 14th Avenue, and I got out with my snow shovel and my salt, and another young man, Mung, in his pickup truck came out, and he ended up using a rope that I had, and a couple of other neighbors that were like in their 60s came out, and between all of us, we just worked to get her free from the snowbank. And over the last couple of months, one of my neighbors that I snow blow for, that's in her 80s, she ended up collapsing while shopping with me. And so I advocated for her to get seen at a clinic. She ended up going to ER, the hospital, and rehab at Mount View, and she's on the verge of being able to get home soon. But I was snow blowing and working on other issues for services for her because she lives alone. She has no computer. She's not into the smartphones or anything like that. But other neighbors continued to do her sidewalk and her porch so that it looked like she was home, and continued doing that all winter long. So I think we could come up with some different events, like in the spring for spring cleanup, and doing some painting, adding some flowers, and doing it in the neighborhoods and making it a community event.
So like a neighborhood focus?
With a neighborhood focus, because I've also just learned in the last couple of days that there's a number of seniors that are one fall away from no safety net. And luckily, I happened to meet her. She was complaining about the city 6 years ago, happened just to bring a flyer and got to know her, but she has no family in the area. And luckily, she's gained her strength, eating right, and will be going home soon. But she still doesn't have that social network except a few of the neighbors.
Okay, so we've got a vibe, a whole community vibe. No, it's something to work from, I think. Cultivating a
also-
neighborhood identity.
Neighborhood identity, and it just happens a neighbor to my north that has rheumatoid arthritis. She normally would be out in her like snowmobile jumpsuit and shoveling, but she's at the point that she can't do that, and between myself going by snow blowing and a young adult male just to the north, he's doing the sidewalk and doing the sidewalk from the sidewalk up to her front and back porch. So it's this kind of this community vibe of starting to get to know your neighbors, especially the older neighbors that may not have the resources, and you could really make their day.
Okay, Tom.
As kind of a two-part question and answer, one on the branding, iconography, and the other on inclusion and so forth. You know, all of us have our own experience in town, and in a way it's unique, but also it's shared, you know, and then we also have a strong history here. As a little kid, I remember going on trips in the car, you know, sleeping back in the back of the car before we had to wear seatbelts all the time. Sorry, officer, but we had to sleep there. And I remember driving back into town and seeing the sign "Welcome Home to Wausau." You know, and as a little kid, that was always like a security blanket for me, a warm blanket. We're back home, and I think everyone, most people, those who are fortunate, have a home. Some don't, and I think homelessness is something we need to address. But home is important to everyone, and I think this is an arena where we should preserve some of that brand of "Welcome Home to Wausau." You know, I think it's the people in the community that's special, and that really represents that well. And so when we look at economic development, it's not just about changing into something else, it's about preserving what's special here, and I think the city could do better on that. On inclusion, though, I think this is an important topic recently. Thankfully, it's come up more, and I've read questions in the local media, and sometimes people ask, well, where's the data? What can we do to tackle some of these things? And I'm kind of a data guy. And the city has access to things. It's called environmental justice, but it's not just about the environment. And what it does is it looks at two metrics. It looks at income, and it looks at minority statistics, people of color. And so we can see this through federal databases and the EPA. We can look at our neighborhoods and say, okay, we've got a working class neighborhood here. We've got a really diverse neighborhood here that's really special. And what we can do then is look at what's happening around them. Institutionally, are they treated the same policy-wise? You know, I live in a working class neighborhood. I'm very proud of that. The city demolished people's homes, senior citizens' homes. They drove people out who lived there for 40 years. Would they do that on Henry Street in Riverview? Is that equal policy institutionally? And I'd say the same for people of color. We can leverage data to make policy more equal.
I know you're getting passionate, but yeah, I know.
Thank you. I'm glad you cut me off.
You're welcome.
I think when it comes to diversity, I think we have to be more than, I don't think we can just, it's something that just happens. I think we have to be proactive in terms of making sure that people feel welcome in our county and in attracting people here. Me, myself, you know, I'm not originally from here. And, you know, I'm a minority when it comes to the general population here. I feel welcome here. I've made it my home. But I know it's difficult for a lot of people coming in, and one way we can do that is celebrating other people's differences. Immediately, I mean, I'm on the board of directors at the Hmong American Center, and they deal with wanting to make sure that they create opportunities to show that, you know, to bring multiculturalism. I think we have to celebrate other people's differences, attend events. If you're a representative, go to these different events, promote them, show that we are welcoming of all. Celebrate when when different groups from different backgrounds here are making important strides. One of the events, the Hmong American Festival, that brought in, and I didn't see a whole lot of stories about it, that brought in, I think, about $3 million in tourism. That's big. And I think we benefit from a diversity of opinions. We benefit from having people of different backgrounds here. And I think if we're going to grow, we need to welcome people of all different backgrounds. And I think for young people, they look for places where there is diversity, where they feel welcome, where they have people that look like them. And you're only going to get that if you're an open, welcoming society. But if you're a society that's closed off to people, that's saying, you know, well, you know, because of whatever religious stance you have, I'm going to not accept this particular individual, I think then you close off so many great people that could come to the county, that could contribute to the county and its growth. There's a lot of issues I plan to deal with. Transportation is one. Opening up jobs, economic opportunities. It needs to be what's attractive to the average person here is attractive to a lot of other groups here. And we also have a lot of great things going for us. We don't promote as much all the outdoor things. We don't direct those to other groups because we think that they just wouldn't be interested. If we start welcoming people and look at our county as the county that cares, that welcomes everyone, I think we'll continue to grow and be better for it. And as a candidate, I'm going to actively pursue promoting diversity within the county and trying to welcome other people in. I'm also on another board trying to bring young people into the northern counties and welcoming people of all different backgrounds.
Thank you.
I think the thing that I sort of see Wausau as is, you know, those little stones that you find all around? That's what makes me happy. Yeah, the Wausau rocks. Like, that's what I think of when I think of Wausau. Is I think of, like, the small things people do for each other, and that it just makes everybody sort of just feel more part of the community. Just finding those little rocks just lightens your mood just a little bit, right?
So we could vibe.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way.
But I recently did a project at NTC. The women's bathrooms don't have feminine products, and I know it's sort of an expensive thing for women. So I got together with a lot of faculty and students, and we have baskets in every female's like bathroom filled with tampons and pads and all that sort of stuff. And so it was so easy to get people to jump on board because we all are doing things that, you know, we do things to show we care to people and just little things that help. So I think that's those little rocks, Wausau rocks, are a perfect example of Wausau.
Very cool. I like those more personal answers to questions instead of just, yeah. And you guys made me think of favorite principals that I've known that have dressed the part, but they've shown up to like almost everything after school. They've shown up, not like they got time, you know, they got to go somewhere. Just, I'm here, I'm present, I'm part of this organization. I believe in it. I believe in all the people that are part of it because without them, we wouldn't be here. So yeah, there's some principles I've known that have really made an effect on me. But you know, it's one of them. So thank you for that. Do you have any more questions that we want to collect? Just that's it? Oh. All right. Does anybody need to take a break? Any of you guys need to take a break? Nope? Okay. Yeah, I know, it's very hot in here.
It is.
6:56.
The window's still open.
Oh, and I do not know your name yet. Does everybody?
Newman.
Officer Newman?
Yeah, I've been here for a few meetings, but
Okay.
I don't know if I met most of you.
Officer Newman. Okay, thank you.
Newman with a T.
What's that?
Newman, T-H-U-M-A-N.
Say that again.
Newman?
Thuman.
Yeah.
Thuman, thank you. Okay, so we are at just about 7 o'clock. So we can probably shoot for 7:30, wrapping up, yeah? All right. So I'm going to just keep going. I'm not sure the time that we'll need out there. With the scare of the coronavirus. Oh, is she coming?
No, Linda is ill.
Okay.
So,
Funny the question about Teresa. Let's all be calm about it. So with the scare of the coronavirus, what about the coronavirus and other health concerns such as viruses like that? What should the city and county's role be in addressing health concerns such as these and their role in communicating that to citizens? So now I'm going to pick from the middle, Deb, but
well, it just happens, I got a call this afternoon from the administrator of Montview that they're dealing with the coronavirus and will be starting tomorrow screening for that at their nursing home and recommending people not to come in for at least 2 weeks. With the city, I guess I wouldn't see them as being on the forefront. I would think that the county health department would be more involved with families and the schools and looking at, and I believe NTC and maybe some other colleges are looking at potentially online courses in order to tide some of that at this point. But there could be issues of with the different viruses and how it's affecting some of the staff that work for the city, and hopefully we won't have any more snowstorms at this point, so that it would affect a lot of the snow plowing. But that there is some issues that I just happened to get a HUD email about how cities and other communities are dealing with the homeless, and that may have those issues, but looking at safeguards, but mainly I would think our county health department would primarily be involved in that, as well as the different hospitals and nursing homes would handle it on their own.
okay, thank you. Sarah?
I think just promoting awareness, right? Probably blasting it on Facebook, maybe communicating with the media about the hand washing, just re-emphasizing the stuff that is being told nationally. And then maybe, partnering with or checking in with some of the schools, like if you were talking about NTC or the county health board.
Okay, Tom?
Yes, well, on this issue, I believe we must be proactive, not reactive, and hope for the best and plan for the worst. So statistically, this virus is substantially more contagious than the seasonal flu. And because there's asymptomatic transmission, it makes it that much more difficult for containment. I mean, containment, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unless the trajectory changes, containment is kind of off the table at this point. We're going to be looking at mitigation. And I think it's not, people poo-poo the mortality rate, but what we have to understand is that while 80% of the cases may be kind of not much at all, a little cold or what have you, 20% of them are very serious. So we have to look at secondary consequences, and that's going to be for that 20%, you're looking at intensive care and things. So I think it's important for the city to interface with the county and the health department and the local healthcare system to make sure we actually have capacity if the worst case scenario occurs. And I think we have to have a plan as a city, and it has to be communicated well. I think that'll make things effective, but it will also stem some panic and fear, and we will have to think about supplies just from an emotional standpoint if there is panic buying. So I think we hope for the best, but really plan in detail and communicate that plan.
Thank you. William?
I think obviously communicating with your constituents about what's going on, what they can do in terms of preventive measures. In terms of the county board, I think there needs to be strategic planning so that you can prepare beforehand and not be playing catch up when it actually occurs, because it's more likely they not be alarmist or anything, but it's going to grow, and it's going to grow not because it's just growing, but also because testing. The more testing you do, the more cases you're gonna find. And people travel, and people don't know right now who has it, who doesn't. So as a county, we need to have strategic planning. At worst, some of the stages that we could take is, a declaration of a local emergency. I would imagine that as if we had a state of emergency, and take measures then at that particular point on suspending limitations on funding if we needed, in order to get extra supplies or things that are needed, because the most important thing is people's lives. Figuring out what to do with not only the homeless, but also the elderly population, and how to make sure that we keep them safe. If we have to, in terms of, for right now, banning events that are gonna have more than 1,000 people, so that we can limit, like I said, mitigate some of this. I think already University of Stevens Point here has already put in place a plan where they're going to be out past spring break and now do classes online. So we got to think about this smart, and the way we think about it smart is planning ahead of time rather than waiting for it to occur. And on the county board level, doing everything that we can to make sure that people are safe and make sure they understand what they need to do in order to be safe as well.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
Well, I work, as I said before, I work in healthcare for North Central Healthcare. And we have a daily email about where things are right now. Our company, for the safety of our clients, has a safety plan in place. There's a safety plan for the employees. As Deb said, I think it's a county health issue, but believe me, Aspirus, Marshfield Clinic, North Central Healthcare are all working with the county board. Many of the UW schools have closed the rest of the semester. La Crosse, Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee. Right now, as of this morning, our risk was still low, but in speaking with some colleagues of mine in a meeting this morning, the concern is with spring break, there will be a lot of travel. And that travel will take a lot of people to different parts of the world and then back. So I think the city should work with the county and with local healthcare providers.
All right, thank you. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 cards in front of me. Any more cards? Last minute thoughts? No, okay. So let's look at our time. We are at 7:05. So I'm gonna see if I can get these last 4 in by 7:30, so we can wrap up. So this one is, I'll just ask the last part of this. Would you consider, and I'm not sure how much sway you would have in this situation, but would you consider making the county board smaller, or at least what is your opinion on that? William, you want to take that?
Yes, and that's the issue that's come up. I think you weigh a few different things, but generally to give you an answer, I do think the county board could be smaller. One of the things is with having so many county board members, we also run into the problem of, when we're talking about economics and where funding is going to go and all these great programs that are at risk for being cut, maybe making the board a little bit smaller so that we have more money to protect some of these programs could be a good idea. We're also one of the largest county boards, I think, which is the largest.
In the United States?
So I think making the county board a little bit smaller, I think could be a good idea moving forward.
Thank you. Patrick?
I believe the county board should be smaller. It is the largest county board, not just in Wisconsin, but in the United States. And sometimes, if you've ever participated or sat in on a county board meeting, I know we have some folks here who have, they can be cumbersome and not to streamline a meeting, but to streamline the whole process flow for the county. It should be smaller.
Okay. Deb?
I agree with it being smaller. I had the opportunity to advocate for the new pool a couple of years ago with a number of other neighbors, and it just seemed that some of those from the county that are outside the Wausau area didn't seem to feel that there was the need. Again, it's another Wausau program, but that we are getting people from all over the county. Some are coming from Anago, some are coming from Stevens Point. And when it opens, hopefully in April, it will be the state of the art throughout the state of Wisconsin. And, but it just seems like there's so many people and so many opinions that it's just getting overwhelming on getting anything done.
Okay, Sarah?
I guess to echo everybody else's answer, yes. Even though it's nice to have like a lot of representation, a lot of voices, but it can get a little overwhelming, so.
Okay, Tom?
Well, the arguments that I've heard around the reduction of size, they make sense to me, and I think this is a case where it could be more efficient, effective, and cost-effective if something like that was evaluated and pursued.
Okay. This one, I'm not sure how much poll you would have on this one either, but I'm gonna read the entire question and go for it. Would you support a county resolution or referendum for the state to ask for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to overturn Citizens United decision? This would say that corporations and such entities are not people and money is not free speech. Sarah?
Yes.
You're looking at 7:30, aren't you? Tom?
No brainer.
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes, you can always pull the constituent's opinion and go from there. It's never a bad idea.
Okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna read through it and then we'll figure out where to go. There are many influences when it comes to being an elected official. How would you preserve your integrity, months, years, and maybe even a number of terms into your position? Do you think you would change? If so, and how? And if you have some guiding principles, what would you say is one of them that would guide you? William?
I think the nature of anything that you do, you're going to change. But it depends on what that change looks like. I would hope that the more years, the more I know in terms of my position, that I'm becoming better at my position and changing in that way. But one thing that wouldn't change is being accountable to the people that I represent. And how you do that, like I said, is continuing to be on the ground, talking to people, and making changes for the county that are going to make sure the county continues to grow in a positive direction, rather than making it about you and changing the way of just trying to hold on to some position. I think we have too much of that in government.
Thank you. Patrick?
Sorry, can you just outline the question just a
Sure.
little bit for me? I had a thing and I had lost it for a moment.
Many influences on
Okay.
us when.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, I've worked in social work for 10 years, and every year every 3 years we have a background check, but we have to have our own compass that guides us through advocating for people. I work with a vulnerable population. Some are homeless, some are elderly. We help people transition if their physical health is taking over the effects on their life of their mental health. And it's the core values that I was raised with: compassion, honesty. But as Will just said, everyone always grows. So you hope that in the process of working with the public, and there isn't a social worker that I work with that doesn't say I learn something new every day. And I'm sure it's true of many professions.
Thank you. Sarah?
Sort of piggyback off that, I guess my guiding principle is that I'm a lifelong learner. So I'm always, I always don't know something, right? And so I think having that humble nature going forward and just being thankful that I'm being chosen to serve in that position, and then asking people their opinion. And there's a lot of experts out there in the community, and I'm never gonna think that I know everything. So I think that's gonna be my guiding, lifelong learner.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, and I would echo that. I mean, I love to learn, and I think one of the positives of being in a situation where you don't know everything or a lot about the topic is you've got that opportunity to learn about it and to improve. So on the learning side, I agree with that. In terms of, this question kind of goes to why I'm getting involved though, and when I created a Facebook page for my campaign, I had to pick a label, and I think the one I had to use was politician, and I kind of cringed when I hit the enter button because that's not how I feel about myself in the civic role as a politician. So, I mean, I look forward to learning, but I hope my people know in the district, neighborhoods, my hometown, I'm a pretty intractable guy when it comes to issues. So if I think something's right or wrong, I'm likely not to change on that. And if there's new facts, I'll take a new position, perhaps, but I will pursue long-term and in an intractable way what I think is right, especially for the people in the community.
For myself, I went back to school in my 30s to get my master's, and more because I was interested in learning more. And for the past 8 years off and on, I've been going to a number of city meetings. I just happened to start the same time as Robert Milkey had, and kind of mentored him along the way. That when I first got out of college back in the 70s, I worked for my hometown, the city of Escanaba in Upper Michigan. So I knew the basics of what the different city services were, but looking at it from more of a policy and management and fiduciary role. And with my background in doing accounting for decades and grants management, I have brought up, as well as some other people in the room have been going to city meetings for quite a while and making recommendations. And at a certain point, when there are changes being made at the council, at a certain point as well, then maybe it's time for us to be part of that change so that we can change the direction of the council. I know for Dennis Smith, he had said he had promised his wife 4 years and that was it. I guess I see the next 2-year term, if there's a number of positions flipped with people with more accounting, marketing, economic background, financial background, it may take a while to get things cleaned up. And so I am for limited terms. I think at a certain point you can end up just kind of tuning out or not being involved in your constituents, but it happens in our neighborhood. We've had neighborhood meetings for a long time, but in some neighborhoods they don't even meet at all, so they don't even know who their alderpersons are. But I think it really depends on where the council is going, and I guess I would rather leave when it's all working well and in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. The last one. Let's see. This is concerning the riverfront development. I'll just read it and then maybe we can. When trouble surfaced with the riverfront development at a council meeting, the developer was asked about the stability of the company. The rep's reply was he has deep pockets. Is this how the developer was vetted for millions of dollars of tax money, especially since he had problems on projects in areas that were available to, okay, so, how do we want to?
Could you say what that word was again of how he was
Vetted. So,
but his response was, oh,
yeah,
okay.
deep pockets. So if you are sitting on city council or a county board or, this is kind of like your compass and how you make decisions and what's best for the community. I guess we just go for it, just go for it.
I know that things that happen in county government and city government start in committee, and I know the city council has legal counsel. I guess I assumed, and wrong with River Life, that before a decision was made that the investor was checked. I certainly would advocate for any project, not saying I wouldn't support the project, but let's make sure that the investors on board are clear and ready to invest. And then not fall back with the deep pocket scenario.
I guess, I think it's important to make sure that any, I guess, vendor or business that the government's gonna work with is fully vetted. So apparently Google wasn't consulted, I don't know. But yeah, I think just investigating and making sure, your due diligence.
I happened to be at some of those meetings, and the other term that the investor was making, Mr. Franz, was capital stacking. And so he seemed to be playing this financial lingo of talking like he's a big investor, and so to try to flim-flam the council. And basically, Mr. Schock did not vet. There was no audit reports required, no financial information, no vetting about who his partners would be, just saying that he's got lots of different projects going on.
Well, what would you do in the situation?
Well,
If you were in the situation to make a
as
decision?
part of that whole process, they had a request for proposal, which they shortened as RFP, where it comes in and they did not have any application process or like a application fee of, Katie's mentioned about $10,000 that's non-refundable. So at least do they have that, or they don't even have, $5 in their pocket. And included in that is to have a credit report. I would have required having the audit reports of prior years as part of it, because he seemed to have a number of businesses that were not going to be a going concern, or were in the process of going through bankruptcy. But the whole process was pitiful. I mean, there was no financial analysis, and even though a number of people, including myself, brought up issues to financially vet it, it was not done.
Thank you. William?
I think the vetting has to be there. I mean, I had to turn in more information to apply for the bar. I mean, I had to turn in a criminal report, financial report, I had to get references, I had to fill out an application, pay a number of fees. At a minimum, I would think we would ask that a company that's going to come into our community and have a big impact on our community would be under the same, under the same requirements. We should know who's coming in our community, what they've done in the past, because I think the best indicator of the future is the past, seeing what they've done, and then make it, this is where you are accountable to the people that you represent, making that information available, and allowing people to voice their opinions about it before it comes into the community, and make a decision on whether or not, one, people actually want it there, two, if it's going to actually benefit the community, and three, that you know who is coming into the community, and make sure that they're properly vetted. And that's what I would do.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, I mean, he said he had deep pockets. In the end, he may have had no pockets at all, I think that's, and there are going to be times when, I think people get fooled. You trust someone, you trust information you've gotten, and it just isn't accurate. And I think in this case, one, with the council, they were receiving information internally, and I think it turned out to be very poor, at least from what was shared publicly. However, this is a case, there should always be some tension, I think, between the media and the government. It creates a good dynamic, but there was ample warning from media outlets in this case of the background, not even local outlets alone. So I think this is a case where the stove wasn't just hot when it was touched, it was on fire. So I think when there are that many warnings, there needs to be more caution, and I think the council, when they're left kind of holding the bag on bad information. There should be readjustment of how that information is vetted, because I think in the end, there has to be more steak than sizzle. And I think that's what we really gotta make sure of moving forward.
Okay, well, it's 7:22. We went through our questions. Everybody got to hear a nice flavor from everybody. So Patrick, Deb, Tom, William, Sarah, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.